All right, hey everyone, it's Mr. Wolf here, and I'm going to be going over evolution by natural selection. So we've talked about evolution for weeks now, and evolution is really the what? It's the fact that populations change over time. But one thing I loved is that you guys kept on asking, well, how does that happen? That how is talking about natural selection. And you guys just spent the past 2 days with the Tukey lab experiencing this phenomenon of natural selection or this process of natural selection yourself. So really the goal of this video is to synthesize or make sure that we highlight the main ideas and the main cause and effects that we saw these past 2 days. So remember, before we started the Tukey simulation, I started with this slide and I said, all right, well, variation exists in all populations. This is like the first thing that we have to have down before we get into natural selection. There's always going to be a range of differences for any trait. In this case, it's human height. So let's just define a couple terms first. Remember, evolution is just change. And the question is, well, did evolution happen with our Tukey lab? Yeah, it absolutely did. In our first generation, we had something like, it depends on what class you were in, but this is one of my classes, had 60% fork tongues, 40% popsicle tongues, and then just by like the 12th generation, there were 65% spoon tongues and 35% popsicle stick tongues. So a completely different Tukey population in just 12 generations. There. So then, like I said before, natural selection is the how populations evolve. Many times it's referred to as survival of the fittest, and we'll talk later on in this class about what the word fittest means. So this is a new term. Whenever natural selection is happening, there's always going to be a selective pressure. And this is any environmental factor that leads to some organisms not being able to survive. And in this case, for our Tukey lab, it was the drought. Finally, our last term is going to be that of adaptation. And I know you guys have all heard of this term before. And as we'll learn later on, it is very important that we understand what adaptation is and what it isn't. For our purposes, just starting, we're going to say an adaptation is a trait that is better suited for a specific environment, for a specific selective pressure that might be there. So, for instance, the Tukeys with the spoon tongues or the popsicle stick tongues, right, were better adapted to the selective pressure of a drought. So there's four main, we could say, steps or parts of the process to natural selection. And the first one is that populations will have variations for every trait. And I made sure to emphasize that at the very beginning of the Tukey lab and at the very beginning of this video. So here are a population of Tukeys that I could have, right? And here's another important factor is that more offspring are created that can survive in a given environment, which means that some organisms are going to survive to reproduce, others will not survive in time for springtime, in time for mating season for the Tukeys. And so here are some of our Tukeys that did not make it to reproduce or to mate. All right, so some variations help organisms survive more, and more of these organisms survive and reproduce, and they pass on their traits to their offspring. Right, so I could see that it was my fork-tongued Tukeys did not survive, and so it's my spoon-tongued Tukeys that end up surviving. So they pass down that spoon-tongued trait to their offspring, and then now my population has more and more of this trait in it. Right, now, some variations do not help organisms survive, and that's why we don't really see the forks too much in this population anymore. Less of these organisms survive and reproduce, and they don't pass down their traits to their offspring because they didn't have a chance to reproduce. All right, so going along with some of the ideas that we've talked about, what I want you guys to do is fill out the concept map on page 2. And here is the word bank. You also have a word bank on page 2 as well. Remember, selective pressure is going to be used twice. And in just a second, I'm going to go over the concept map, but take out your phone, set your clock for, let's say, 5 minutes, and spend 5 minutes challenging yourself to try to complete that concept map before those 5 minutes. All right. So at least spend 5 minutes on this, and then just continue to click. So click pause for now, and then continue to click play once you're done. All right. So we have mutations will always happen at random. We have sexual reproduction, and both of these things lead to variation in the population, right? So number 3 is kind of where we begin in natural selection, and that variation is caused by mutations that happen randomly, and sexual reproduction when you have independent assortment crossing over, and just the fact that you are getting this mixing of DNA from mom and dad. Right, so now that we have this variation, there's going to be a selective pressure in the environment, and it just depends on what the organisms are, what the environment is, and when we have the selection pressure, there's some traits in this population that are unfavorable. They're going to be selected against. And keep in mind, it's the environment that selects against them, right? The drought was selecting against the fork-tongued turkeys, so they do not survive and reproduce. Now, the selection pressure of this drought selects for the environment. The drought selects for the spoon-tongued turkeys. These were the favorable variations just in this specific instance, right? There could be, by the way, another environmental condition that made the fork-tongued turkeys better adapted. But for this specific environment with the drought, the spoon-tongued turkeys, the popsicle stick-tongued turkeys are better adapted. Right. So over time, we could say that that population is well adapted. Right? You have all those spoon-tongued turkeys that could easily get water out of those watering holes. Right? And if this population is isolated enough over time from its original population, we get a new species. And so this whole process of creating a new species, this has led to all of the biodiversity, all the different types of life forms that we have today. Right, so this is what you need to complete by tomorrow. By Tuesday, is go to socrative.com. I already made the quiz live at this point when you're watching this video. So remember, the login is Great Scott. There's just 5 questions, just a quick check for understanding of what we've went over. And this kind of helps me, since I'm gone, see how you guys did as a class with this stuff. And then make sure to complete the homework. It's going to be pages 3 and 4 in your packet. There's just a few scenarios. By the way, page 4 has to do with the moths. And sometimes the simulation doesn't work on, let's say, like Chrome. If that's the case, try a different type of browser, try a computer, but do not come to class on Tuesday saying that, oh, the simulation wasn't working. You guys are tech savvy. Find a way to get that simulation working. All right? My recommendation, I think, is to use Firefox. I think that's the best bet. All right? And even if you don't have a computer at home, head to the ILC at some point during your free period. All right, guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day. Stay in school. Thank your parents. I wonder if this is still recording and you guys are still watching it. And for some reason, I can't figure this out. Why